Good morning. Welcome to today's first session at the Neuroblastoma Parent Symposium 2025. My name is Hayley Blackwell from Solving Kids Cancer UK, and I'll be moderating this session along with Emma Potter from the Royal Marsden, which is focused on hope in survivorship. We'll be hearing from 5 adult survivors about their personal journeys and challenges and triumphs navigating life after treatment. So with that, it's my genuine great pleasure to welcome everyone here today. So I'm going to ask the speakers to introduce themselves briefly from left to right, starting with Louis. So over to you.
Hello. My name is Louis Moorhouse. I am 23 years old and I'm a musician and all-round audio person by trade. I was diagnosed in April 2003 when I was 18 months old with neuroblastoma, and as I say, I'm 23 now, so been off treatment for about 20 years, and yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I was very nervous to find out I was going to be speaking first, I'll be honest with you, but that's fine. So I got nobody else's ideas to steal from with what to say. And you lot all have, so it's all good. Yeah, I think that's kind of it for me, but it's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be here. Thank you.
Great, good morning everyone. My name's Tom Becker and I was diagnosed with neuroblastoma in 1992. I'm now 35 years old, so it's been about 30 years plus since I've been off treatment. And yeah, really privileged to be here today. I didn't really know that this sort of survivorship community existed until a couple of years ago, so I'm sort of in the wilderness and I've come into this community and it feels really great to be part of it. So yeah, I'm really pleased to be here today and just share a bit about our stories, and hopefully that kind of helps build the community as well and people feel a bit less alone with neuroblastoma, which would be really great to achieve.
Yeah, my name's Charlotte Wint. I am 24 years old. I was diagnosed when I was 5, finished treatment just before my 7th birthday, making me 18 years off treatment this year. Yeah, just very happy to be here, hopefully give some hope to everybody and share our side of everything post-treatment. So, yeah.
Hi, my name's Molly Treves. I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old and I finished treatment in 2006 and I was roughly on it for about 18 months. I've been in remission ever since. I'm now 21 and yeah, it's a privilege to be here to be with everyone else. It's such a nice community to be in and it's lovely to finally kind of share our side of the story and let people know what happens post-treatment and how we kind of deal with day-to-day life. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Becky. I actually was diagnosed with neuroblastoma when I was 18 months old, and that was back in 1972. And back then there weren't the facilities there are now. And I'm absolutely amazed that they treated me the way they did, and I'm still here today. Until recently, when I got involved with Hayley and her team, I'd never met another person who'd ever had neuroblastoma. I just didn't even realise all of you were out there going through the same thing. And I'm so grateful and privileged to have found all of you and to be part of this journey that some of us have been through and some of you are all going through and still will be. So hopefully you'll get some encouragement from the fact that we're all still here this many years later. So.
Absolutely, thank you all for coming, just as Hayley said. And I was going to start with the first question about why you're here, but I sort of think you've answered that in your introduction, so thank you. So I think I will go on to the next one. I was going to ask you, what is it that made you come here? What is it that you'd like to share, perhaps firstly with parents or young people? So is anyone thinking that they would like to start with that one? Molly, do you?
What a way to go in first. I think the biggest thing for me is that when I was growing up, there wasn't the resources that there are now, very much like what Becky touched upon. It wasn't even, talking about survivorship. It was talking about getting to 5 years remission, and then that was it. It was kind of the deep end. So I think for me, I just want to kind of explain how survivorship works. I think a lot of people, parents and patients likewise, who come out of treatment have no idea what resources there are, what kids go through, whether it's normal or not. And I think just to kind of shed a light on not only how difficult it is, but also where we are now and how we got here with different support networks and stuff like that.
Yeah. Louis, I can see you nodding there.
Yep.
Have you got anything to add to that about?
I think, for me, it's about exactly what Molly said about, that it is hard and there are things that come up that you're not necessarily warned about. But then I would also say that it is a bit of a balance in the sense that, there's some really negative things that come post-treatment, but there's also weirdly a lot of positive as well. Like, I'm completely blind and partly deaf, and there's no way of dressing that up. That's not great to be, to have that. That's not a great thing to have, but equally, I know that my life, for better and for worse, not one or the other, would be significantly different if I hadn't have gone through treatment and wasn't blind now and that sort of thing. A lot of the really important people in my life, I know post-treatment because I had treatment or because I'm blind, which was because of treatment. So there definitely are positives to come from it as well, and I think it's important to share that side of it as well.
Thank you. Absolutely. Does anyone else feel that there's some positives? Yeah, Charlotte?
Yeah. I think part of it is we didn't know about this charity until after treatment, and again there was nobody that we knew while I was going through it. So I think having places like this is a great place to come together under the circumstances, but it means you're not alone. There's other people who know what you're going through, and it's just a great support network that I think we need more of.
I was going to go back to your original question, Emma, on sort of what would I want to get across. I think from my point of view, it's probably that there are things that come after treatment that are physiological, but there's also the kind of psychosocial side of things. I think just knowing, I can see why from a parent's point of view, there's such relief after treatment finishes if it's been successful. I understand that, but almost allowing your child to sort of express maybe when things are difficult and life doesn't feel so great. Yes, we're kind of lucky to survive such an awful disease, I guess, but also it's okay to sometimes feel that life's a bit rubbish because of some of the later effects you might be left with. So I think almost just giving a bit of permission to patients or children to express that is really important.
Bit of balance. That sort of goes on to the next question I was going to talk about late effects. When did you start to realise that there might potentially be some late effects from your treatment, or maybe you didn't? And when do you think that we should speak to young people about that, and how? That's a lot of questions. Anyone feel that they want to start somewhere there? Becky, you go first.
I obviously, when I had neuroblastoma and for quite some time after recovery, there was just nothing. There was no knowledge. So my GPs and everyone, they just didn't have the information about late effects that other people now do have. There was no support network. So I think it's so important that you're aware very early on, really, of the possibility of late effects. And if you don't suffer from them, then it's a bonus. But obviously, if you know that there's a possibility you will, you're already sort of forearmed or forewarned. And you'll know then that you can seek help for them and treatment and make life as easy as possible. Whereas, obviously, back in my day, there was just no knowledge of it. So I didn't have a support network. But there's such a fantastic network out there now So the information's available, and you can seek the information that you need to make it an easier journey than perhaps it was years ago. So don't give up hope. You can live a very full and fulfilling life as a survivor, even though it's challenging and it might be painful and it might be not as easy as for other people, but it won't hold you back. You can still pretty much live a fabulous life, even though you've got late effects or,
Charlotte, please.
Yeah, I think my parents were very open with me throughout the whole process. I knew what was going on. And I think with them being honest with me, it sort of made me realise there are going to be some sort of late effects, but it's the sort of stuff that you cross when you get there. You can't really prepare yourself. You don't know exactly what's going to occur. I had hearing loss from the treatment, and I should really wear hearing aids. I don't. I feel like I can gauge enough to sort of work my way through conversations, and then it's just the support of my parents and everybody that, you know, I can get through the late effects, and I'm not going to deal with them on my own.
So that brings up an interesting point about you making decisions about your hearing aids, and that's something I think, Molly, we've talked about, isn't it? About being your own advocate as you get older. So parents.
I think, yeah, it definitely has a transition phase from when you're a kid, you go to the oncology appointments or doctor's appointments and your parents advocate for you. As you get older, you realise that the doctors are kind of crossing both people. They're like, what's going on with you? How do you feel? So you very quickly learn how to progress into being an advocate and also trying to manage the long-term effects of that, trying to communicate with doctors in their own kind of language to make sure that they understand what you're going through, and to kind of get the message across that if something is serious, that they should pay attention to it and not put it on the sidelines and be like, okay, that's for like next time, or that's for a different appointment. But what Charlotte touched upon is very true. You know, there's a lot of difficulties when it comes to survivorship, where it's your parents kind of make the decision for you when you're a child. You know, it's, you know, you get up, you get dressed, you know, they've got that kind of locked down in stone. So when you do become a teenager, young adult, it does change quickly. You realise that you are then in control of your medication, your hearing aids, your kind of physical abilities to do stuff, and it really does kind of go, oh, okay, this is very strange and unusual. And yeah, it is a constant balance of being happy, being aware of your own difficulties, but also realising that when you do need help, it's not a problem to ask for it. It's not a problem to lean on certain support networks or disability aids, because they're there to help you.
Yeah. Louis, I was thinking about that network of support as Molly was talking about, as you learn to manage your own health. And what's your network like now?
Yeah, I think a lot of the people, you know, socially, which for me was a big thing, you know, in my teenage years especially, that was when kind of, in primary school, the blindness, for example, wasn't really a thought. It was just kind of, oh yeah, that's a thing, and everyone just kind of accepted it, didn't question it. And then when you hit your teenage years, which, you know, it's not necessarily a medical thing, but it's definitely like a social thing and a sort of mental thing that kind of comes in of, oh, you know, I've got this difference, this big difference, and I'm different and I don't fit in with everybody else. And that was when the sort of problems really started occurring for me, and that's when I started noticing other things as well, you know, like fatigue and that sort of thing. They almost became more apparent because of that. But like I said, a lot of the, you know, my closest friends, my two closest friends I met, and they had cancer, and I met them through a choir, which is a choir that I'm a part of. Not to sing, can't stress setting up. I play keys, I don't sing in the choir. for very good reason, as I've been told by many people. I met them through the choir, and the choir was it's run by 2 people at the long-term follow-up department that I'm a part of, and it's a choir for survivors of childhood, teenage and young adult cancer and similar conditions requiring long-term treatment, and that's been an amazing support network. You know, my 2 closest friends I met through that, and so many other people as well, and it's like a family unit because you have this understanding, like even if it's not necessarily all neuroblastoma, for example, there was one other person that had neuroblastoma who I met through that, and she was the first sort of fellow survivor of neuroblastoma that I'd ever met. But we've all been through something, and it's all, you know, it's a similar kind of experience that you've been through and similar kind of experiences that you have afterwards. And just having that kind of support network of people who just get it, what you've been through, what you are going through, and what you might go through later on in life, kind of thing, is just amazing. And you know, as I say, I wouldn't have met those people had it not happened. You know, so there are definitely good things that come out of it, because yeah, like I say, you know, 2 of my closest friends came from that, and I love those guys, and I wouldn't have met them had I not been through all that. So there were definitely positives.
Brilliant.
As well.
Tom, I can see you nodding, and I think it's interesting because you were very late to find. So do you want to just talk a little bit of that experience?
Yeah. Well, Lou and I were chatting a bit before the session started about those teenage years being tricky, as they are for most kids, I think. So that's not uncommon necessarily. But you're right that there's an added layer when you have something about you that makes you different. I think it's interesting that we've all got slightly different late effects, but I think that's probably a feeling that we have in common. Mm-hmm. So sort of regardless of what the late effect looks like, you can have that feeling. But then, yeah, for me, discovering, so I'll be talking about PanCare in a moment, so get a little plug in early. I discovered PanCare, and I turned up to a meeting and I met Emma and this whole community that exists, and now I've had the same feeling here this weekend of realising that there's so many people out there with a similar experience exactly as you described, Louis, of neuroblastoma specifically here, childhood cancer more generally. It was quite a profound moment to discover that and to realise there's that whole community. And we've all got our own lives going on, we're doing our own things, but to come together and sort of see people that are dealing with similar stuff has felt really special. It's changed something quite significantly for me, I think, in how I perceive my own late effects and my own experience in neuroblastoma.
And do you have anything that you'd like to say to young people, a message that you might be sending out to young people who are finishing treatment and coming towards the end? Charlotte, do you want?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would say is just take every day as it comes. There's going to be good days, some bad days, some days where you're going to have all the energy in the world, some days you might not have as much energy, but just take every day, one at a time. There's no rush, there's no time scale anymore. Just live your life, live to the fullest, do what you want to do.
Yeah, sounds good for anyone, really.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's I suppose, telling people that while it is difficult, there are support networks out there. Yes, it's difficult to find them originally, but I think now with social media and, you know, different groups like Solving Kids, it's very, very diverse in the support networks you have access to. I think very much what Charlotte just said, you know, take every day as it comes. You know, you're not going to feel 100% most of the time. And I think just to normalise that a bit more and be like, you know, today I have really bad fatigue, or I have really bad pain, or I'm just not feeling good at all, and just allowing yourself to accept that and just be like, you know what, why should I hold my whole body to a healthy person's standard, and just, live every day as comfortably as you can. I think that's the biggest thing for anyone should recognise, you know, just allowing yourself to see yourself as just who you are, not holding yourself to someone else's standards, not holding yourself to, you know, someone who doesn't have the conditions or has been through as much treatment as you have had.
You touched on it earlier, but I was thinking perhaps a bit later on in life then, when you're approaching adulthood, that transition into almost kind of taking ownership for your health a bit more yourself. And I think that happens at different points for everybody, and people are ready for that at different times. So for me, I think that happened through my 20s more than anything, but for other people it might happen earlier. But with that has come, a real sort of sense of empowerment, and I don't know, there are sort of, sometimes I'm quite excited to explore things that might help me out with my late effects, which might sound a bit odd, but this idea of, I don't have to be totally passive anymore. I think when I think back to as much as I can remember, which isn't much of the treatment period, it's a very passive period. You're just there, people are doing things to you and you hope it works. I think to now be in a position where I understand what's happened to me, I understand the late effects and how they show up, and I can kind of pursue my own research or go and speak to experts that might help me. It's a very different feeling somehow to what it felt like as a child or as a teenager. So I think that transition for me has been huge, and maybe that comes quite far down the line. But yeah, that's a really significant moment as well in the whole sort of journey of survivorship, I'd say.
And I've got another final question here, I think. How do you go about, do you tell people that you meet about your cancer, employers, that sort of thing, school? Do you talk to other people about it, and how do you go about that if you do? Or
I think it's important to make sure that people are aware, especially when you're going into a working environment or even a school environment, because as everybody here has said, we do suffer from fatigue frequently, or pain, or, you know, some days you get up in the morning and you just feel totally drained, but you know you still have to face the day. But if the people around you know the reasons behind that, they're a lot more accepting of that, and they don't think, oh, you're just a slacker or you're trying to get a day off sick. But you know that you can, you know, you have genuine reasons why some days are a bit more difficult, but then there's other days when it's, you know, you can cope just as well as everybody else. And I think, but if people are aware around you and they know and they see that a majority of days you can get through quite easily, they appreciate that even more, because they know that even though you might feel a bit rubbish, you're still getting on and doing your job, or doing, you know, your school work or whatever. And I think it's important to make sure your friends in your circle know, because that's where you can get the most support. Your friends, I think, are, well, certainly to me, like the main part of my life. I couldn't have probably got through my life without my best friend. So they support you and they understand, because they know what you've been through, and they know that some days really are quite difficult, but you can still, you know, have a great time and a great life. But they understand when you are feeling a little bit less able, and they don't judge you.
yeah. Have you always felt comfortable sharing that information?
Never.
No?
I think very much in, you know, when I was a kid, because when I was in treatment and then out of treatment, it was very aware that I had cancer. So all my friends knew, pretty much the whole community that I was with knew. So it wasn't, you know, a big secret. When I then eventually transitioned into school and then college, it became much more difficult to express myself without being too open about it. I think I was very cautious because I knew I was outwardly disabled anyway. I walk with a cane, I have hearing aids, so I instantly knew that I would look a bit different from everyone around me. And so, yeah, it does take time, it takes a lot of practice, and I'm still not perfect at it. But yeah, I do really vouch for Becky when I say, like, just having a social circle that understands who you are, doesn't not appreciate your conditions, can fluctuate on a day-to-day basis, even by hour. And I think just the people who choose you for who you are and not the other way around is probably more important than trying to figure out, oh, I've got to, socialise today, I've got to, make sure that I go into school or college or work and, explain my differences. I was very blessed that when I was at college, I was able to just email someone and be like, I feel awful today. And they were very gracious of that. I think as well, because I was literally in college before COVID lockdown happened, it was very much like everything went hybrid, everything was online, so it wasn't like I felt like I had to explain my reasonings for not attending, but I was very grateful to have a small circle of people who were, I like to call them the misfits, we were all a bit weird, but it was that sense of you just didn't have to explain yourself. Everyone knew that if you were feeling rough or you were unwell or just, you were living life and it wasn't a good day today, that having someone to be like, okay, well, someone's got to tell you, you need to go home. But yeah, it's still very difficult to kind of broach the subject with new people all the time. The newer people you meet, the more you're like, how long do I leave it before I tell you everything?
Do you think it's necessary to tell everyone?
I think it depends on your circumstances. I think, you're meeting someone for the first time, I don't think it's probably wise to dump a whole load of information on them. I think brief introductions, suffer with chronic fatigue and that, people might get the gist that there's a lot more history behind it. I think, it's very dependable on circumstances, jobs and that. You might have to be a bit more open about it, which understandably you're going to be uncomfortable. I think none of us have probably ever gotten used to, being as open as people would think we are. And I think it's just about balance and knowing that the people around you who actually do care about your well-being and your physical health will care about you regardless of what day you're having.
It really sounds like that support net with your peers is so important there, Charlotte, what do you think about, do you tell people when you first meet them or?
Yeah, so I missed a lot of my first year of primary school when I was going through treatment, and then I was going back when I could, like if I felt up to it. I was only doing short sessions really, and I think I was quite lucky that my mum had, they gave my mum a job in the room next door.
Oh.
So if there was something up with me, mum was right there. And all of my peers, they kind of knew what was going on. But then when I went back to school, they were all like, she's all right now. No, not quite. But then going into work, I now work at a children's hospice where I went when I finished my treatment. And a lot of the staff knew who I was anyway, but I was very open about everything. And I think because I had a back condition from the treatment, I had to be quite open with that because I had to go for spine surgery last year to go and fix this. And work were very understanding about it. Everyone was brilliant when I came back. They're all asking me still, are you all right to do this?
Yeah.
I want to just say, stop babying me now. I am all right.
I want people to baby me.
But it is, again, it's having my parents close by. Everyone at work's very understanding. If I'm struggling, I can put my hands up now and say, but I used to struggle with asking for help when I needed it. So
so it sounds like
to learn that.
Tricky to ask, but you learn it, and actually once you get over that hurdle, everyone that you've has been really supportive of that. Yeah.
Well, I've found that I never ever asked for help. I've always tried to be self-sufficient, get through everything and fend for myself. It's only in the later years that I've realised that asking for help is so important, because now I probably need more help, and I didn't know how to ask for help. But once you get over that barrier and you feel that you can ask for help, it makes a massive difference. So don't hold back. If you feel you need help, ask for it, because I'm sure there's always somebody who will be willing to give you a hand if you do need it. So, and I think that's important, knowing that you can ask and you don't have to be embarrassed to ask. So.
Shall we go for questions, if there are any, from the audience now? Oh my goodness! That's fabulous. Hayley, I'm going to...
Yeah, okay. Should we go first?
Hi everyone. Is it working?
Yeah, we can hear you. So you
good,
can
good morning
say who you are and
everyone.
question.
Thank you so much for everything you've talked about up there. I've got very wet eyes sitting here watching you all with my 15-year-old neuroblastoma survivor. I wanted to ask, because obviously you're all grown up, whilst I don't allow myself to look too far ahead, because that's something we've kind of trained ourselves not to do, and I think that's why I'm getting upset, actually, because listening to you all, I hope one day Lucy's sitting where you are, telling other families her story. But we talk a lot, Lucy's at GCSE stage now, we talk a lot about what she wants to do when she leaves school, you know, what she wants to do for a career. And I just wondered whether what's happened to you and, you know, some of the physical and the mental effects, late effects, have impacted your choice of career and what you do for a living. More so, you know, are you doing something that you know you can do physically, but it's not really what you wanted to do, or have you managed to follow your dreams, basically, is what I'm asking.
That's a really good question for Louis.
Yeah, I think it has. For me, again, it was the sort of, like we were talking about earlier, the social side of it. As a teenager in particular, as I said, I found that they were difficult to sort of fit in socially. So music was always kind of in my life from when I was 4 years old. But I think during my teenage years, that was something I could do. And I could sit at the piano and play as good as anyone else, kind of, in my school year. And I fitted in with that, if that makes any sense. Like, that was my way of going, no, I am like you guys, I can do it. Wasn't doing the grades like everyone else was, but I could do it, and I could do it well, and I had perfect pitch, which means I can basically identify notes just by hearing them, basically, which not a lot of people had. So that was always my kind of, my get out of jail free card. It's like, oh, you do music? Yes, I've got perfect pitch. Oh, right, okay. Wow. You actually can do this. So I think because of that, yes, because that just became my escape and my life, really, and then I've been able to sort of make a bit of a career out of that. And similarly, audio, I listened to a lot of audio books and podcasts, and I would listen to, I don't watch a lot of TV because the audio is often awful, and I've noticed those sorts of things. And again, that was my escape. I would escape into those sorts of things, and you know, I would really listen analytically to audio. And as I say, I'm an audio editor and producer as well. That's kind of one of the other things that I do. So I think that's a very long way of basically saying yes. Sorry about that.
And Charlotte, your career is
Yeah.
possibly defined by
Yeah.
past?
A lot of the staff that I work with actually said when I was at the hospice as a kid, I told them I was going to come back. So did my university degree in the early childhood studies, did a few years childcare experience, and then I've been at the hospice 2 years this year, and it's the best place I could be. I love it. And I'm hoping to work my way through care support into nursing. So yeah, I'm happy with where I've got to. It's where I've always wanted to be.
Okay, any other questions? Go down there. Mandy?
Hi, is that working? I'm Mandy, mum to Peter, who's same age as Lucy actually, 14 going 15. I was really interested in the advice you were giving to the children, but I wonder if you've actually got any advice for parents, because I think the hardest thing for us as parents when we've been through this experience is letting go of control. And, you know, we've been so in charge of every decision and what happens next, and, you know, doing all the research and you know, I've got a 14-year-old who's not terribly interested about being involved in things at the moment, but I can imagine that he will be, and he's certainly in other aspects. He's got a spinal cord injury as a result of his disease, and in that side of things, he's definitely trying to sort of get more independence. And I'm just wondering if you've got advice for the parents in the room about how you go about relinquishing some of that control back to your children to allow them to be the independent adults that they're becoming.
I think it doesn't get easier. I think it's one of the things that varies from person to person. I know my parents probably have a different experience compared to every other person, but I think just being open with them, just allowing the kid to just be a normal teenager, just, you know, when they have days where they're just like, oh, I don't want to talk to you sort of thing, just be like, okay, that's just a normal teenage thing. I think perfectly in just all sense of the words, what the parents do doesn't get enough credit. You are the kid's advocate, you are the kid's nurse, doctor, etc. You are everything. So when they do get to a point in their teenage years where they're like, all right, I don't need you anymore, and you're just like, whoa, what's going on here? So I admire everything you guys do, because it's not an easy job. I think just allowing yourself to go through different thoughts and feelings and being like, oh, I feel weird today, like I feel like I should be with them sort of thing. Just allowing yourself to kind of give grace for what you have done rather than what you haven't, because, you know, you've got this young person to where they are now. You know, there are going to be points where you can sit candidly with them and explain, you know, this is what we went through your whole childhood, you know, this is how, you know, our lives were just medicalised for like 10 years or something. So just allowing them to understand that, and also, you know, giving yourself credit where it's due, that it's not an easy job, no one wants to do it, but you've got them this far. And I think as much as anyone probably lacks the confidence in, you know, seeing their child kind of leave home and stuff like that, it will take time, but being in places like this, having that support network of other parents who go, yeah, my teenager's exactly the same, and just being like, okay, now we can all kind of breathe a collective sigh of relief. But yeah, I think just having a good support network of people, you know, talking to friends, family, partners, whatever, just kind of allowing yourself to sit with those emotions, because I think everyone can agree that the experiences that you've been in is just get the kid through treatment. I don't want to think about next year. I just need to get them through this round of chemo, radio, whatever. And then you're kind of throttled into a deep end of, we've got no kind of oncology support. We've got nothing in the sort of area of, you know, weekly blood checks, you know, weekly blood pressure marks and stuff like that. So being okay with not, you know, sort of, you know, being overwhelmed and stuff like that is perfectly natural. I think anyone would in their circumstances, and just lean on the people who are there for you as well. You know, don't try and hide away the kind of feelings of, oh God, I feel awful today, you know. I've got to be mum, I've got to be doctor, I've got to be, you know, 3 parents in one essentially. Just allowing yourself to take a deep breath and just go, right, I need to talk to someone today. I don't know who that is, whether that's your partner, your mum, your dad, or just another parent. I think every parent in here would be like, yep, that's what I need. Someone who just gets it and doesn't have to, you know, explain today that, you know, everything else that's been going on. Just, you know, allow yourself to just vent to other people and give yourself credit where it's due.
And if you're finding it hard to sort of let go of the reins, really, I suppose, is the term I'm looking for, just make sure that when your child is sort of mid-teens, whatever, and they want to be more independent,
so long as they know that you are still there, so they can come to you at any time for your advice. And you'll find that they might try and be independent, and then they might realise, actually, I want to go back and ask mum and dad because I'm really not good at this. And you'll always be there for, you know, for them to come back to. So it's not that they're rejecting you, it's that they're sort of trying to find their feet in the world the same as, I suppose, every other person, but that they might just need a little bit of support when they realise that you're the people that know a lot more about it. So don't ever think that you're sort of redundant.
I was remember from just a really practical thing on the sort of appointment side of things and going to speak to doctors about any late effects. There was definitely a point at which my dad would previously maybe go to the appointments with me and kind of lead the discussion, and then he started to say before the appointment, so what questions do you want to ask Tom? And so then it was the beginning, I guess, of that handover to me to then go to those appointments on my own and kind of run that on my own. So yeah, looking back, I can see, oh, right, that's what he was doing. Didn't notice it at the time, but yeah.
Yeah, my mum was the same. She'd always sit me down and say, what questions do you want to ask? And then I'd still look at my mum and make it. But no, my mum's my best friend, you know. She always has been. And you're never going to grow out of that relationship. You're going to need them all the time. I don't want to make you cry, I'm sorry, Mum. But, you know, just listen to your child. They'll tell you in more ways than one how they're feeling, even if it's not actually verbal. And I feel like I can go straight to my mum if I've got anything, and I can talk to her about absolutely anything in the world, no judgment. And she's who I go to first. Okay, you can stop crying now.
Okay, did we have another question? Helen?
Hi, thanks for sharing your stories today. It's really heartwarming to hear. Our son was diagnosed at 3 years, 4 months with high-risk neuroblastoma, and he's now 16 months post-treatment, and it's all looking really well. He's almost 6. But he loves going back into hospital, and all he remembers is the play team and getting to do what he wants and having the chef there and everything. He loves going back in. And I just want to know, like, how much do you remember, because you were also all quite young when you went through treatment, how much do you remember of those days in hospital, being wired up, having cannulas put in, having high-dose chemo? Because my worry is, when is it going to hit him? That what he's been through, or will it actually hit him when he's a bit older, or what age did you actually realize that you had been sat in a bed in hospital for about 18 months? Because that's my worry now, because he loves going back in, but when is it going to be that time where it hits him? That's my question.
Can I answer that? Because bear in mind, it's been over 50 years since I was in the hospital, and I still have good memories because I was surrounded with other children. Everybody was kind to me. The treatment was difficult, but I still had good memories of the time being in there. I think I've told you before, I desperately wanted to eat a slice of gala pie that they had while I was on treatment. And my parents were saying, no, don't eat it. And I said, but Mum, I really want it. So she said, okay, you have it. And I was sick for the whole afternoon, but my memory was still, that gala pie was delicious. And if I can remember that 50 years later, you'll find that the good memories actually, it was certainly in my case, outweigh the bad ones. So it was like I was saying earlier, I can still remember being wheeled through the corridor of this old drafty hospital where the corridors used to go through the outside and had those big sort of plastic doors that flap open. And I can remember the smell of it, and I can remember distinctly what it was like. But I also remember sitting at little kids' tables with colourful chairs and bowls of Rice Krispies. So I wouldn't worry too much, because I think there's enough of a balance. Certainly nowadays it's probably even better, and I've seen how lovely the kids club out there is, and you know, your children are resilient, so they will remember the good times the same as we all remember our childhood. So I wouldn't worry too much, because I think there's enough of a balance that it won't sort of affect them too negatively, hopefully, you know.
I mean, I was going to touch upon Becky's point completely. I think you are totally entitled to worry about it. There is never going to be a point where you're not worried about your child, and I think that is totally normal. I think for me personally, even though my treatment been and gone, I did have a lot of trauma from it, but that trauma was very kind of hidden under layers of complex memories that I couldn't quite place myself. Yes, there were memories that I can kind of see through almost like a haze almost, like I sort of remember blips of it, but not enough to make a whole kind of, here's the 10 minutes of how this happened. I think one, candid memories, talking to your kid about the times that, you know, you were in hospital, yeah, it was really tough, but, you know, here's the times that made you laugh, or, you know, the play therapist coming in and distracting them for like 10 minutes, you know, that was my kind of life for 18 months. You know, having the, I guess, the discussion that while it was, you know, difficult, it was difficult for everyone involved, but being aware that as they grow older, they might remember more of it. They might come to think, did that actually happen, or was that just a memory that I don't even remember? And giving them a place to talk about it as well, having that space to be like, right, okay, they're remembering something from treatment, they're not doing a very, you know, well and mentally, maybe we should get you some extra help to kind of process it. And I really, really benefited from just having a psychologist to talk to. I'm very lucky now that I've got a therapist, and I talk to her quite candidly about it still, and I'm 21, so the memories never fully go away, but having the kind of space to be like, right, here was the positive, and here was the negative, and here was the kind of in-between where we just don't really remember all that much, and just allow yourself to kind of, you know, worry about the child, because I don't think that's ever going to stop, and I can quite vouch that my parents sitting right in front of me still worry about me, and I'm, you know, I'm as good as that's ever going to get. But yeah, just don't be shy to talk to them about it. Kids, yes, they are resilient. They're probably thinking the same thing you are as well, which is, how am I going to make it through tomorrow? I don't know how I'm going to deal with this memory. I don't know how I'm going to deal with going back to hospital and stuff like that. So just having that discussion with them, especially as they're growing older, they'll be more open to having quite deep talks, but just giving them the space and giving yourself time and grace to, you know, allow yourself to go, oh, that was really tough.
And also, if your child's already enjoying going back to hospital for the appointments and things, they obviously must feel comfortable there. So in all honesty, they've probably got some good memories as well. It's not all negative. And it's like, one of my greatest memories of the radiation, I had intensive radiation treatment. But instead of having bad memories of that, my one good memory was to get me to stay still. My mum promised me at the end of the treatment I could have a tube of Smarties. So I stayed completely still. And I remember the Smarties more than the treatment. So, you know, you just have to find what keeps your child more, you know, upbeat about a terrible situation, really. And, you know, they're the sort of things that your child remembers. So, hopefully, you know, I know it's different for everybody, but it can be positive as well.
I think I'm similar to you, Becky. I remember really enjoying going in for my checkups because I knew I'd get a balloon at the end of it. That was really good.
And that's why I'm fat, because I got the Smarties.
I didn't get anything like that. I don't like Smarties, incidentally, but anything else.
I know, I used to get a sausage roll.
Well, yeah, like everybody got something, didn't they? I didn't get anything. I'm going to complain about this.
But no, I think going back, I'm not afraid of hospitals. I remember a lot of the play ladies, as I called them. They were a big part. But one thing that I do not like is blood tests. I can go and have it done, and I can give them my arm. I still cry, you know, 24, and I still cry for needles. But it's only because I know my veins are small.
Yes, that is.
As a kid, I used to have screaming competitions when they were doing it. I might have won a few times, but my poor parents' eardrums is all I can say. But yeah, I will just shed a few tears now and I'll get it done. But it's not all bad.
And one of the ways I got through the blood tests was, again, my veins are small, so they often have to use a baby needle even now. But when I was little and I had had so many blood tests taken and my veins had collapsed, and I just remember at the time, and I was sobbing, I said, please don't do it again, please. So the person taking the blood said to me, oh, look, you've got the same colour blood as the Queen. So after that, every time I went, I was like, I've got the same colour blood as the Queen, and my arm was straight out. And so, you know, there's ways round getting over different fears, and it's just coming up with the right, you know, just a tiny thing can make a huge difference, you know, so.
I think, yeah, medical professionals, when they do have a laugh with the patient, they don't treat them as a commodity, is one of the best things. I still remember a couple of years ago having blood tests, my veins are awful, and I always apologise to the doctors who do it, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you're going to be here for a very long time if you don't understand how bad they are. And I had a student doctor come in and he was trying every vein on my arm, and he looked awful. By the end of it, I was just like, I think you need to go away and come back in 10 minutes. And he was like, was trying to do a vein on my hand, and I specifically remember him going, you're doing really well. And I went, oh, thank you. And he went, no, I was talking to myself.
Brilliant.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Helen, mum to Michael, who's about 2 years post-treatment. Thanks so much. There's not a dry eye in this corner of the room, so it means so much to see you all on the panel today. My question's slightly similar to the previous one, but my son was in treatment from sort of age 1 to 2. He's 4.5 now, so he doesn't really understand what happened to him at all. And I was just wondering how your parents, if you were younger, obviously if you're older you kind of know what you're going through a bit more, but how they talked to you. Did they use the word cancer? For your own mental health, obviously as parents, you know, anxiety about becoming unwell again is kind of through the roof. And was it helpful, Charlotte? I know you mentioned how your mum was really open and honest with you. Was that the best way to do it, or did that kind of lead to anxiety? And yeah, if you could just chat a bit about that.
I think it's been very beneficial that they've been honest with me. But I think because I was slightly older, that I did understand that there was something up, as well as being in hospital quite a lot, moving around. But yeah, I think my mum and dad were honest with me from the beginning. And I think that made it a bit better, that it didn't feel like they were hiding anything from me. And it's helped me as I've got older to understand absolutely everything that I need to. So yeah, I think using the word cancer as well, don't be afraid of the word. People automatically try not to use that word, and I think you just need to say it. Don't be afraid of it.
I think, yeah, it's 100%, you know, you're bound to be worried about it. I think every parent would be worried and is worried about how to kind of explain that to a tiny child when most of the time they're just like trying to just be themselves at such a young age. And I agree wholeheartedly with Charlotte that honesty is the best policy. You know, I still remember when I was a kid, I remember treatment very well. So I used to play surgeon and doctors with half of my toys. So it was quite an eye-opener for a lot of the for nursery staff to sort of see me talk about cancer quite candidly. But just, I think, yeah, just be honest with them, you know. Kids are going to understand a lot more than you think they will. And I think just having, you know, other support. So, I mean, there's lots of, you know, resources now like books and, you know, videos on YouTube. And if they have questions, you can find the answers if you don't have them, and then sit down with them and discuss those answers. I think that is the biggest thing, you know, just allowing them to ask those questions and not feel tightly shut out and being like, no, we don't talk about this, you know. I'm used to a lot of people shying away when you mention the word, I had cancer all those years ago, and they're like, oh, we don't talk about cancer because it's really weird and horrible and this, that, and the other. And it's like, actually, it's better if we do. The more we normalise it, the more people are going to have that better understanding of how to educate and, you know, raise awareness and, you know, bring up a child in such a complex environment and just be like, you know what, this is what you went through, here's some pictures or here's some, like, you know, letters and that, and just explain it really gently to them, because I think they'll understand way more than what you think they will.
And I totally agree with that, because when I was going through everything, it was different in those days. There weren't the support networks. My parents were sort of alone. They didn't know anyone else who had it. So until I was 12, it was always that lump in your tummy. When I was 12, I was finally told it was cancer, and then it was a bigger shock to me. So I'd have rather known earlier, because it's not like I was stupid just because I was young, you know, and I would have rather known exactly what it was. But it was different back then. I'm not blaming my parents. My parents were wonderful. They, you know, they would have given their lives for me. But they just didn't know how to handle it. So because that you've got so many people around you can talk to and get advice. So even if you're nervous to tell your child that it was cancer, you know, it might be that you can get advice from other parents. I would personally have rather known early on rather than wait till I was 12. But, you know, so don't be afraid to tell them. I think it is probably easier for the child to know earlier.
Yeah, it is a weird dynamic, I think, because for me, certainly, I don't remember much of the treatment. I definitely don't, I couldn't conceive of the risk that was associated with it and what we were going through. So I think there was a curiosity for me about it, because there was, I don't know, some weird distance. Although it happened to me, I didn't know that neuroblastoma was dangerous and there was a risk to my life or anything. So I was interested and I kind of wanted to know, and I would quiz my parents a bit, I think, whereas I guess for them, yeah, it was kind of bringing up a really difficult time. But I think it's inevitable that you kind of need to find out about it. Apparently on my first day at school, I went around asking all the other kids, what hospital do you go to? And then discovered that not everyone does that, so it had to be explained. And yeah, at the start, maybe it's just very simple explanations, and then over time it becomes a bit more detailed.
Okay, great. Anya?
My question is a bit different. I was really struck by the point you made about employers in particular and having those conversations. And given outside of this room, not many people know children get cancer, and even fewer understand how long those late-term side effects are and what they can be. What do you think could be done from an advocacy and an awareness point of view, particularly with employers, so that those conversations are less awkward for you, so you still have a good experience in the workplace, so you're not held back and you're not feeling concerned about taking that sick day that is so justified? What can be done from that advocacy and awareness point of view, do you think?
I think it's a very complex subject still to this day. It's a lot more talked about than it was, say, 10 years ago. I think having groups like this, you know, we've got 5 different people of different backgrounds, all with the same connection, and having the conversations that are so open and candid, you know, not being afraid to talk about it, not being, you know, shied away or pushed away by society. I think pushing it forward is like a massive protest half the time. You know, you're trying to protest against doctors who say, oh, we don't think this should be like talked about. And it's like, actually, I think it should be, because, you know, your job is to do this day in, day out. And that's amazing that you do that. But then you've got to live with the side effects and, you know, the treatment and the memories and the trauma. And having the advocacy of different people of different ages say, okay, here's where I am in my life, 20 years on, 30 years on, etc. I do hope in the next few years it gets more mainstream. I do think a lot more people are talking about it than there was. And I think, you know, regardless of where it gets spoken about, I think it will always be a big thing. Social media has massively picked that up in the past 10, 15 years. I think as much as I diss social media, it has done a wonder to connect people with all the same commonalities and the same interest and the same kind of, you know, healthcare concepts as well. So attending events like these, you know, looking up local charities, looking up, you know, fundraiser events and stuff like that, and actually getting more of a word out there, I think is the biggest thing, and not being afraid to, you know, tell people that you had cancer, because it's not a whole part of you, it's a part of you, but it's not going to just define you as a whole person.
And also I just think the awareness needs to be raised like enormously, because you always hear about the same things. There's a massive sort of thing about breast cancer and prostate cancer, but when do you ever hear, about childhood cancer or neuroblastoma? Everybody I've ever spoken to in my life until I found this group didn't even know what neuroblastoma was. Even at my doctor's surgery, when I say, well, I had neuroblastoma, they're like, what sort of cancer is that? And I'm thinking, well, you're in the medical profession. So the awareness needs to be raised drastically, and I think, and that's what SKC are part of, because the job they do is to do that. And I'm just hoping that it means that more employers, more surgeries, more everybody is more aware, so that instead of feeling that you have to explain yourself, they should already know that, that's the situation, and they should be aware of it already.
Yeah, there is, you're right, Molly, that it's improved a lot, I think, the awareness of late effects and the need for long-term follow-up care. There's a lot further to go. There's lots happening at a European level, definitely, and in the US. But one thing that we see that other countries have that maybe the UK doesn't yet is a kind of national childhood cancer survivors network or lobby group. Whatever that looks like, whether that's a coalition of organisations or its own thing, I think it seems that where that exists in certain countries, the lobbying power of those groups is quite strong, and they're able to drive through changes. Things like the right to be forgotten is a big one in a few countries, especially where they've got insurance systems, that your premiums go up if child cancer is on your form. I've seen that with travel insurance, I'm sure you all have as well.
Yeah.
So there are things like that, but there's other aspects like, making sure employers understand and give you the accommodations that you need. So I think, there's lots more that can be done with what we've got. Maybe some kind of national group that works on survivorship would also help us. And SKC is pretty well placed to do that, I'd say.
The boss is over there.
Have a chat.
We've got time for 2 more questions. Should we go over this side?
Hiya. I'm Abby, mum to Ariana, who is 9 next week and 17 months post-treatment. My question's more about siblings, any siblings that you may have. So Ariana has 3 younger sisters, and naturally they see Ariana as, the one who gets the most amount of attention, spending a lot of one-to-one time with mummy or daddy, going to hospital appointments, but all they see Ariana come home with is extra presents, because when she goes into hospital, obviously the play team give her presents, or we might buy her presents if she's had a horrible procedure or anything like that. And I do just worry as to how that looks in future. Although they all really get on and that they don't say much, I do just worry that jealousy might kind of take over, and wondering if any of you have had that experience before and how you've handled that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got an older brother, so he was 8 years old when I was in treatment, and our lives were kind of stripped apart to the bones, really. We were living away from each other for months at a time, so I completely agree with you. It does have its impact, and there's not really a thing you can do to avoid it. You want to get the kid through treatment, you want to get them through that blood test, that appointment, try and keep them as happy as possible, and it is about the balance, I think, realising that, it's difficult to balance your time when you've got a kid who needs your full attention all the time with all the different health problems, and also spending time with all of your other children and all of your other family members. It's difficult, and I don't think anyone in the world is going to deny that at all. I think the biggest thing to do is let the feelings go the way they should. Jealousy is a perfectly normal feeling for anyone. It doesn't feel good, but allowing the kids to feel it and be a bit, kind of miffed off is okay, because the older they get, I think, is the more that they realise it's not actually a good thing that the kids are getting presents and extra attention. It's that balance between, most teenagers would be like, oh, they're getting extra presents, they're getting all the attention and that. And that's a perfectly normal and sound explanation, but then it's also explaining why they get it. It's not because you favour them, it's not because, you know, you love that child more than the others. It's because you need to get them from, you know, the day that they wake up to the time that they go to sleep at night. You need to get them through that day as easily as possible, and it's a massive, massive job. And I think the older that your kids will get, I think they will realise quite quickly how that dynamic works. It's not, you know, just, you know, you're kind of giving your kids presents because you feel like it. But yeah, just give your love to every child as much as you can. You know, explain to them that it's not because you favour one over the other. It's not because, you know, this child means more than anything to you. Every child is going to be, you know, your kid at the end of the day. And I think everyone who's got siblings will agree that, you know, there is a massive difference in terms of dynamic. Older, younger, same age, whatever, it's difficult. And having the candidness to share with them how difficult it can be as the kid get older, you know, myself included, I've had a pretty rough time. So trying to explain to my brother that, you know, the reason that I'm away from home most of the time isn't because I'm off on like a nice holiday in London sort of thing. It's generally because I'm not feeling good and I need extra checkups or tests or appointments and that. And then I think to myself, actually, if I was an ordinary person going to a hospital, I would probably want a nice treat myself. So allowing yourself to kind of just go, you know what, we're going to put a treat aside for you, but then someday in the future, we'll all go out as a family and just make the best of the time we have together.
Yeah, I've got a little brother. I say little, he's 6'3". What I mean to say is I've got a younger brother. He was 1 when I was going through my treatment, and we were very fortunate that my nan and granddad stepped in with me moving between hospitals, my dad working, mum was with me. So my brother lived with my nan and granddad for quite a while, and he built up a relationship with them. And for a young lad that he quickly learned I was poorly, that I was getting this attention because I was poorly, and he put me first a lot of the time growing up. And it was only until recently, actually, that he was still putting me first, and he's just started challenging me now, so, you know. But yeah, he was very understanding. He's been very good auntie-mum, so yeah, they'll be fine.
I think it's just about having the conversation, isn't it? Like with so many of these things that we've been talking about, it's just about having the conversation and having that level of understanding with everybody involved. You know, I've got an older brother, and he was 5 or 4 or 5 when I was having my treatment, and again, my parents were away a lot because they were with me a lot of the time, and I know that had an impact on him. And you know, he was only young himself. You know, he's at an age where he's developing as well, and it caused problems for him. And you know, but I think because my parents are great. They are in the audience, but they are genuinely great. You know, it was always a kind of an open conversation that we had between, you know, me and them, and Sam, my brother, and yeah, we've got a really good relationship now. So yeah, morning, Sam, if you're watching. I hope you are.
That's a good way of putting it, that you've got a good relationship now. I've got 2 older half-sisters, and so of course they'd already not got their dad in their lives anymore, and my dad had taken them on as his own. But relatively quickly after that, I got very sick, so they sort of lost the parents, the whole set of parents and me. So they resented me like anything. They really did. But now, I mean, fairly soon after treatment, they realised that they absolutely loved me and they wanted me to be well. So as you get older, that relationship just gels. So they might be resentful at the time because of their, you know, you're not there as much for them or whatever. But after a while, they do realise it is for a reason, and you'll find that the love is stronger then between you, between between siblings. And, you know, one of my half-sisters is like my best friend, so I wouldn't worry about the future of it, but at the time you're going through it, it can be quite challenging. But you can always buy them a little present as well, you know, if funds allowing. You know, you can find a way around it, but I think you'll always have that sort of jealousy there because of the distance, you know. But don't worry, because it does tend to sort of even itself out again.
We have time for one final question. Yep.
Hello again. It's not actually my question. This question is from my daughter Lucy. She's just pushed a piece of paper in front of me. So you've all spoken really openly about some of the late effects that you have experienced, and we're all really grateful for that. So if this sounds personal, a bit too personal, please forgive us, but she's asking a genuine question. When you've talked about the late effects, you've talked a lot about some of the physical late effects. So Louis, you've spoken quite openly about the effects on you, Molly and Charlotte as well. But Lucy's question was more about the psychological effects and whether you have had some of those or have some of those. If you are open enough to share those with us, we'd be really grateful.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone going through this is going to have some sort of psychological impact. I struggled a lot throughout my childhood. I knew I was different. And it was difficult, I'm not going to lie. It was really tough going through different therapists and trying every sort of method of therapy under the sun and feeling like I wasn't trying hard enough most of the time, even though I was. I think it was only when I was about 15 that I started receiving the right care that I needed. It was very patient-directed and not kind of just stipulated in a little book. I think, yeah, I got told very well by a psychologist that I loved, and it was, you're never gonna not have a day where you're affected by it. You know, you're gonna have this for the rest of your life, and it might be really good days, and it's in the back of your mind, and you would think, oh, I've never had cancer. Other days it's gonna be a lot, and you know, you have to allow yourself the grace and the time to just, you know, go through it and go through the emotions. You know, past couple of years have been pretty rough. I'm very fortunate to have a therapist who understands me, understands my physical and mental well-being, and we have a good rapport together. And you know, I am aware that it is a very rare thing now to have, you know, a good relationship with a therapist, or even get a therapist at all, if you're lucky. But I think just allowing yourself to be open about the psychological impacts as well. A lot of people see the physical and they don't necessarily know what's going on inside your head. And just being aware of some of the things that might trigger it. A big thing for me used to be the smell of disinfectant. It just literally took me straight back, and that was the thing that I was like, nope, can't do this. So just kind of being in that environment was enough to trigger me and to make me feel a bit uncomfortable. So there are days where you're going to have rough patches. I think anyone with a very stable mind would think that. But there's a reason that you're going to have a bad day, you know. If you're going to the hospital, you're going to have a blood test, you're going to, you know, you've had something that triggered you in that day to just bring you straight down again. It's going to be difficult, but with the right kind of tools and mechanisms, and you know, with the help and support, if you have it, you know, you're able to get through that day. It's going to be a slow progress. It's not overnight, and it breaks my heart to say that, because if I was, you know, Lucy's age, I would want someone to have told me, yeah, tomorrow, if you've got all these, like, if you've got this massive pack of like coping mechanisms, you can fly through it. But it is a really tough journey, and it's not easy for anyone. But supporting each other is the biggest thing that you can do. You know, being aware that days might fluctuate for both of you. You know, it's not going to be 100% overnight, but just if you need that support, try and get it in place as quickly as you can. Make sure that you've got that network of, you know, professionals to kind of handle that for sure.
Lucy, you were so brave to actually put forward that question. So I'd like to be brave myself and tell you today something I've never told anyone. But I think my psychological problem stems from my physical problem. So where I had such terrible radiation, it's left me with a twisted spine and scarring, and I'm all lopsided, and I try and cover that up every day because I feel embarrassed by it. So psychologically, I don't feel like everybody else. And for my whole life, I've gone through that feeling, I have to cover myself up, I have to hide it. But genuinely, it's because of that I'm still here. And really, I should see those scars and that almost deformity as a sort of achievement in life. So thank you for making me feel brave enough to mention. Oh, bless you. Thank you so much.
To close after that. God. Thanks, Lucy. Thank you all so much. Oh, God, Lucy, what have you done to me? Thank you for being so open and giving us yourselves, honestly. I'm really, really privileged to have been part of this session, and we couldn't all be more grateful, and I'm sure there's a few tissues needed. So, yeah, you're all so inspirational. Thank you for giving us some hope.
And I think we can really see the power of having that network around you, and you guys have all built that network, and look how well you've been doing it with your careers, your school and so forth. So, I mean, and here's SKC just giving us that network again. So, thank you so much.
I think they would need another clap. We're going to hand the floor to Tom. Tom is going to take centre spot, and he's going to talk. So he's a board member at PanCare, and he's going to provide an overview of PanCare's work on improving quality of life and access to optimum long-term follow-up care for survivors.
Oh, if he doesn't break the mic.
We leave.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to be part of this weekend, the session we've just had, which is hard to follow, and then also getting to talk to you a bit about PanCare. So it came up briefly in the discussion, but I didn't really know that survivor was a word that was used for people that had cancer in childhood. Definitely didn't know that there was a community out there working on late effects and long-term follow-up care. And then a couple of years ago, I was just sat in my flat doing a bit of Googling on what exists out there now compared to sort of what was there when I was younger. I wanted to find out a bit more. And one of the things that came up was PanCare, and they were going to have a meeting that year in Budapest. And I emailed them and asked if I could go along. They said yes, I booked my tickets and I went. And I met Emma there, and I met a whole community of people, all dedicated to working on long-term follow-up care for childhood cancer survivors. And that sort of opened the door, really, for me, and opened my eyes to what's out there. And so, I've got a clicker, haven't I? I better use that. And so, yeah, PanCare, I've stayed involved, and I got elected to the board, which was a great honour a couple of years ago, and I'm still involved. And I want to just share a little bit about what PanCare is, what we do, but also get on to, quite quickly, hopefully, some resources that PanCare's produced through previous projects we've done. There's lots of ongoing projects, but some of the ones we've done so far have produced materials that might be useful to people, maybe not right now, but at some point in the future. And I just want to sort of draw your attention to them. So I'm starting with why PanCare, but I think the question is probably a bit broader. It's why look at long-term follow-up care at all. we've already touched on it, that in the UK, there's over 40,000 survivors of childhood cancer. Across Europe, that's 500,000, and those numbers are growing. I think all of us here acknowledge that treatment for childhood cancer needs to improve. Survival rates need to improve from where they are, but they have got better over time, and so that population of people who had cancer in childhood going on to live their lives, that's growing. But at the same time, again, as we've just been hearing about, a majority, 60 to 70%, will experience some kind of late effects. And so those late effects, which might arise at the point of treatment and persist, or they could be things that you're just at an increased risk of emerging later on in life, they warrant some kind of ongoing care and attention, whether that's monitoring for them coming up or whether that's the ongoing treatment for something that's already there. So PanCare's mission is to ensure equal access to optimal long-term care, to improve, and this is the clincher really, it's to improve the quality of life for every child and adolescent in Europe after their cancer treatment. And I think, Emma, that actually is every person. I don't think it's just child and adolescent, so maybe we need to change the wording of it, but people who've had cancer in childhood and adolescence onwards. So that's sort of why we exist. That map there is something that's on our website. It's a kind of crowdsourced map of long-term follow-up care clinics across Europe. It's definitely not exhaustive, because we rely on people submitting information to us for that. But what it shows is that there is a real patchiness. Even if we did have an exhaustive map, we know that it's not consistent, the availability of long-term follow-up care and also what that care looks like. There's a disparity between Eastern Europe and Western Europe, as you might expect, but there is also just patchiness within countries. So a big thing is improving our understanding of what good long-term follow-up care looks like across the board, but then trying to improve the consistency and quality of it throughout Europe as well. So what is PanCare? We're a really small organisation. There's sort of 2 part-time employees. There's a board of 15 people. So really what we are is the network that we bring together, which is a complete mix of professionals, doctors, nurses, researchers, physiotherapists, sports scientists, survivors themselves and their families, usually parents. And our kind of set-piece event really is our annual meeting. So that's us there in Ljubljana in Slovenia last year. And we all come together. And it's a couple of days of talks about, I mean, similar to here, the latest research on late effects, examples of models of long-term follow-up care from different clinics across Europe. And it's just a chance to meet lots of people that are all working in this field and are dedicated to this field. And I mean, one of the things that struck me when I went to the first meeting was the number of people that were there kind of in their own time, had paid to be there out of their own pocket, whose job it is to work in this. So yeah, people whose career is working in this also take their time off to come and learn more about it. So there is just this community across the whole continent of people who are so dedicated to this, and that was hugely inspiring to me. So our annual meeting is a big thing, but research is another big focus of PanCare. We've done several projects over the years, and I'll come on to some of the outputs of those. We've got 3 live at the moment that are listed at the bottom there. I won't go into them, but they're all on our website if you want to learn about them. And it's all about long-term follow-up care and what that needs to look like, how we can improve it, how we can improve access to it. There's a few other bits and pieces that we do and are starting to do more of. I think a big sort of increasing focus for us is the dissemination of some of the work that's come out of the research that PanCare is involved in. But yeah, I won't go into all of it now because I don't want to be over time. So coming on to some of the resources that we've produced that might be useful to people, maybe not right now in your journey with neuroblastoma, but at some point. One thing that PanCare is involved in is producing guidelines, clinical guidelines for long-term follow-up care. There's a group called the IGHG. They sort of harmonise guidelines for clinicians across Europe or even globally. PanCare is really involved in that. But more recently, we've translated all of those guidelines for the full range of late effects that child cancer survivors might experience. You're not going to experience all of them, but it's just there is a long list that you could experience. And put those into plain language. So they are in language that we as survivors can understand, our parents can understand, but also, crucially, non-specialist healthcare practitioners can understand. GPs, mostly, probably. So those are there on our website, and the website will help you find the ones that are most relevant to you based on the cancer you had, the treatment you received. And you can take those to an appointment and say, look, I've read about this. It says we should probably be monitoring for these sorts of late effects. Here's what it advises. Can we have a discussion about it at least? Or could you refer me on to the specialist that can help with that? So that is there on the website, produced in over the last few years, published quite recently, we're now working on translating, unofficially translating those into various languages with support from people that just want to get involved and help with doing that. And then another resource that could be really helpful is having a treatment summary when you finish treatment and start to move into long-term follow-up care can be really useful, because just remembering the details of what treatment you received, I mean, I don't think I really remember. So having it written down somewhere by the professionals that treated you is really helpful. And the sort of add-on to that is a survivorship care plan that says, well, based on the cancer you had and the treatment you received, here's what we recommend you should receive going forward. Even if you just have that treatment summary, it's such a useful document to be able to give to, again, GPs, or any other specialists that you go and speak to. There's lots of different ways of doing that. Different hospitals will probably do it in different ways. What PanCare produced is a template that tried to sort of bring together all the different examples of what a treatment summary might be and try and get the best balance between the right level of detail that you need for it to be useful, but also to make it easy to use, easy to understand. So again, that is there for people to just go and download, take it to your specialists and talk to them about, is this something that we need? Is this a good way of doing it? There's loads more on the PanCare website that's worth looking at, and also just there's all the ongoing work that we're doing. So if it is something you're interested in, you want to know more about, go there and read about it. You can become a member of PanCare. I'll do that plug. And you can come to our annual meeting. That is open to people, mostly people kind of working in the advocacy space, because it's a couple of days of quite sort of involved talks, but it's really interesting. There's such a wonderful community to be part of if you want to kind of get involved beyond the UK borders. But on a more UK-specific front, there are lots of resources available to us as well. There's the CCLG's Living Beyond Cancer booklet. That applies a bit more of a UK-specific lens to some of the kind of work that PanCare's produced. There's also all the work that SKC's doing and the coaching sessions that are available, which I'm sure all of us know about. So there is that more country-specific information as well. But I think the real kind of strength is having that European network where we can see what's working well across different countries, draw from all that best practice, and then being able to apply that to a national level through national organisations like SKC is kind of where the real benefit then comes. So that relationship, I think, is really important. It's been great that, Hayley's come to some of our PanCare events. I'm really, honoured to be here today as well, talking about PanCare. So I think that link is really essential. I don't know how I'm doing for time, but that's pretty much it from me. I just wanted to point to those resources, encourage anyone who's interested to go and read about us. Really happy to chat about it outside of this. Emma's here as well, on the board as well. Also happy to talk about it, I'm assured. And so, it's a really great organisation, very small, but doing really big things. This is our lovely board, so they're all very nice people. But there's the website. There's the email address if you want to know more. Just get in touch and get involved. Thank you.